I caught my fiancée texting her ex on our engagement night. If that sentence sounds like the kind of dramatic moment that only happens in movies, I need to tell you now that it does not. What happened to me was real, and it happened at the worst possible time. On our engagement night. If you have never had your entire future collapse in a single moment, you cannot understand how fast the ground disappears beneath you. We had been together for a long time, long enough to believe we knew each other, long enough to book venues, send invitations, and tell family and friends that we were building a life together. The engagement felt real, the planning felt real, the future we talked about felt real, and all of it was a cover for what she was really doing when I was not looking. The hardest part to explain to people who have never experienced a betrayal this public, this devastating, and this badly timed, is how much it changes not just your present, but your entire past. You start replaying old conversations, old moments, old promises, and you realize none of them were what you thought they were. You realize the person you were building a future with had already been building something else on the side. And the worst part is not the betrayal itself. It is the timing. It is the fact that it happened when I was most vulnerable, most invested, most committed to a future that she had already abandoned. What I did not understand then was how much trust can blind you to patterns you would notice in anyone else's relationship. The signs were there, the distance, the secrecy, the excuses that did not quite add up. But when you are planning a wedding, when you are focused on dates and venues and guest lists, you do not scan every interaction for danger. You assume cooperation. You assume the person standing next to you at the altar is the same person you fell in love with. You are wrong. The breaking point happened on our engagement night. I was not looking for it. I was not suspicious. I was just living my life, doing the things couples do when they are about to get married. And then I saw something, heard something, or found something that changed everything. Not gradually, not over weeks of investigation. In one moment, one sentence, one screen, one conversation. That is how betrayal usually arrives, not with a dramatic build-up, with a single piece of information that rewrites your entire reality. There is always a physical moment when the body understands before the mind does. My hands went cold. My breathing changed. The room seemed to tilt and narrow around whatever evidence I was holding or seeing. I stood there processing information that my brain refused to fully accept, because accepting it meant accepting that the person I loved most in the world had been living a lie. And that is a pill that does not go down easily, no matter how much evidence you have. Once suspicion became evidence, I entered a phase I still do not remember fondly. It was part shock, part rage, part humiliation. The timing made everything worse. This was not a random discovery on a random Tuesday. This was on our engagement night, when I was most vulnerable, most invested, most public about my commitment. The humiliation was not just private. It was shared, visible, and in some cases, witnessed by the people who mattered most to me. What made it worse was not just the act itself. It was the fact that she had been planning this, hiding this, managing this, while I was planning our wedding. While I was picking out venues and flowers and music for our first dance, she was living a double life that would destroy everything I thought we were building. That hurt more than the betrayal itself, because it meant I was not just losing a partner. I was losing my ability to trust my own judgment about who deserved access to my life. The scale of the truth matters because it changes the emotional category of what happened. This was not a moment of weakness. This was not a mistake that could be apologized away. This was a sustained pattern of deception that required planning, coordination, and a level of emotional compartmentalization most people are not capable of. Once I understood that, I stopped asking whether the damage could be explained softly. I started asking whether I could respect myself if I stayed with someone who had shown me exactly who they were when they thought I would never find out. Even before I made any final decision, something in me had already started separating clarity from comfort. Comfort would have meant ignoring the evidence, getting through the wedding, and dealing with the fallout later when the guests were gone and the pressure was off. Clarity meant naming what was in front of me without dressing it up, even if it meant canceling everything and facing the consequences. That shift hurt, but it also gave me back a level of internal steadiness I had been losing for a long time. Eventually, there is always a confrontation, whether you want one or not. When I confronted her, she did what people who get caught always do: denied, deflected, minimized, and then tried to manage the explanation. First came confusion, then excuses, then the classic defense that it did not mean anything, it was just a mistake, it was not supposed to be a big deal. But lies change shape when they are cornered. And eventually, the whole performance collapsed in front of me. In that conversation, I learned something I have seen repeated in almost every betrayal story since. When someone has been lying for long enough, exposure does not automatically produce honesty. Often it only produces a faster, more desperate form of strategy. I also learned that closure is rarely given cleanly by the person who caused the damage. More often, closure is assembled privately from facts, behavior, silence, and the eventual realization that you no longer need a better apology in order to make a better decision. That realization was painful because it forced me to stop waiting for her to become morally elegant after choosing something much uglier. After the confrontation, the aftermath begins, and the aftermath is rarely cinematic. It is practical, repetitive, humiliating, and emotionally expensive. I had to make phone calls I never thought I would have to make. I had to cancel venues, return deposits, explain to family and friends why the wedding was off. Some vendors refunded me, some did not. Some people were kind. Some people asked if I was sure I wanted to cancel over one mistake. That question taught me more about who understood betrayal and who had never lived through it than any other part of the process. There is also a social cost to betrayal that people underestimate. You start thinking about who knew what, who suspected what, and who watched the relationship move toward a wedding without saying a word. Even when no one intended to humiliate you, the mere possibility that other people saw pieces of the truth before you did can feel like a second wound. It is not pure ego. It is the pain of realizing your private devastation may have had an audience long before you had language for it yourself. And then comes the part no one glamorizes: the paperwork, the practical decisions, the humiliating explanations, the return gifts, the canceled honeymoon, the dress or suit you will never wear again. Meals still have to be made. Bills still have to be paid. Work still expects your attention. Meanwhile, your mind is replaying scenes it cannot fix. That contrast between ordinary responsibility and extraordinary pain is one of the loneliest parts of the whole process. In the end, my decision was less dramatic than people imagine and more important than any single argument. I did not go through with it. I did not marry her. I did not forgive her because forgiveness without consequence is just permission to hurt you again. I canceled the wedding, walked away, and started rebuilding a life that no longer included someone who thought on our engagement night was the right time to destroy everything we had built. That decision did not erase grief. It simply gave grief a direction. Instead of circling endlessly around the betrayal, I began moving away from it, step by difficult step. Recovery did not begin with peace. It began with routine. I had to rebuild trust in small, unglamorous ways, by keeping promises to myself, by protecting my sleep, by speaking honestly to the people who had earned access to my life, and by refusing to keep confusing suffering with loyalty. That process was slower than I wanted and less dramatic than movies teach us to expect. But it was real, and reality mattered more to me now than performance ever could. A major part of recovery had nothing to do with her and everything to do with identity. I had to figure out who I was when I was no longer organizing my choices around a wedding, a shared apartment, or a future that had been built on a foundation of lies. That sounds abstract until you live it. Then it becomes very practical. Different mornings, different habits, different spending, different boundaries, different standards for what gets access to your time. The rebuild was not only emotional, it was structural, and that structural change is what made the healing last instead of feeling temporary. Looking back, the moment that saved my life happened at the worst possible time. But the reason it saved everything is that it forced me to see the truth before I made a permanent legal and emotional commitment to someone who had already shown me they were not capable of honoring it. I do not tell this story because I enjoy revisiting it. I tell it because there are people still living inside the version of denial I once called trust. If you are one of them, I hope you understand this. Clarity may arrive at the worst possible time, but it is still a gift. It asks whether you will keep protecting a lie because you are afraid of what truth will cost, or whether you will accept the cost and finally keep your own dignity intact. That choice is brutal. It is also where a real life starts again, and that is the part I wish more people understood. Betrayal is dramatic in the discovery, but its real meaning is revealed in what you do next. Do you go through with the wedding because everything is already planned, or do you let that truth reorganize your life around something cleaner? That question changed everything for me. If you have lived through something similar, then you already know the answer is never simple. But it is still worth saying out loud.